What's up, everybody?
What's
What's
up,
happening?
y'all?
It's so
What is
good to see
cracking?
everybody. Yeah, man. It's we're in another month, and it's a blessing to be able to be back with the Christian Leaders Book Club, and so very thankful for this journey that we've been on, man. It's been amazing, man. The learning that we've been able to just engage with one another through the book,
Hmm.
say, the people that have engaged with us, and all that kind of good stuff. It's been amazing, man.
Yeah. It's been a good journey, man. I can't believe it's already September. So we only got 3 more books left, man.
We
Which
got
means we got to start looking at next year.
I thought about that this week. I was like, Pastor John gonna send me a text and he gonna be like, yo, bro, when can we meet about next year? I'm like,
Yes, sir.
I ain't ready.
You know how we roll.
I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I'm not ready. I need some more time. I need some grace. But yeah, we'll get it done and definitely looking forward to next year. Um So let me do this because there's some people that may be on here with us, and this may be their first time. They're trying to figure out like what is this about and what y'all doing? What is
Hmm.
this? And so I just want to show this image really fast so that people can see kind of how we've been flowing all this year. It's been amazing, man. And to your point, Pastor John, like I remember in October of last year, November of last year, us working through. We spent like 2.5 hours on a call working
Hmm.
through these books and figuring it out, and even coming up with the order of them and being very intentional about that. And
Yep.
so the fact that now, like you said, it's already like it's not just September; it's the end of September.
Right. Right. Yep. Last quarter, man. Last quarter.
Yeah, I think I saw somebody post something the other day that was like, it's 100 days left in this year, so y'all better get it together.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So we started off in January talking about At Your Best by Carrie Newhoff, which was a book about personal development and how to improve how you manage your time. Reparations, ooh-wee, that was a powerful one. Uh,
Oh,
talking about the biblical and the cultural justification and paradigm shift that's needed if we're going to actually have an honest dialogue about reparations.
mm,
We did talk about speaking across generations, which was an incredible book, navigating different generations. Such a meaty book. Character Still Counts by James Merritt. So had so many like sticky statements and all that kind of good stuff about leadership.
yep.
Our hardest one this year was Becoming Human.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's gonna stand the test of time this year because the other 3 ain't that hard.
Not at all. Not at all. Well, actually, I haven't read the book yet for December, but if you, based on what you told me about it, I'm
Yeah.
pretty positive it's gonna smell the test.
Right.
Pass the
Right.
test rather. Seven Pillars of Health, really really good. I've even been thinking like last couple of months since we read that book. More living food. That's what I've been navigating, and so
Mm.
that's been good. Oh my goodness, Toxic Faith. That was a great book.
Yep.
That's when we discovered there's actually two additions to that book.
Yeah. Yep. Found that out real quick, but it's
Yeah,
all right.
yeah. Last month was
Mhm.
getting it right. Oh, so good, man, so good in so many different ways. And I love if y'all are not following Pastor John, make sure you do that. His Instagram and social media is at the bottom of the screen. You actually put out sort of a carousel, social media carousel
Yep.
with the parenting, and that was really good. Gave a great summary of the book. But y'all can go back and listen to this on both of our YouTube pages. That discussion. This month we deal with if Jesus gave a TED talk. There it is, right
Yeah.
there. If Jesus
Yep.
gave a TED talk, it's going to be an incredible conversation. Next month, hold on. Next month, we jumping right into it.
Compassion and conviction.
Compassion and Conviction, the AND campaign. And the amazing thing about this, Pastor John, is I just had a meeting yesterday with the headquarters team from the AND campaign, and we are officially approved to start an AND campaign chapter in Tampa, Florida.
In Tampa. Come on,
Come on.
man.
Yes,
Got your
sir.
chap got your chapter down there. Come on, man.
Yes,
I
sir.
know
We're ready to
I
make
know that's been in the works for a minute, so I'm glad you got that sorted out, brother.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
man,
gonna
we're
talk
making
about we're
progress.
gonna talk politics in October ahead of the election. It just seems like the right time to do it.
Ahead of the election. Ahead of the election.
Sounds like the right time to do it.
Soundtracks. Yep, soundtracks by John Acuff. Uh, Undoubtedly, it's probably in my top 10 books of all time.
Mm.
It's probably in my top 10. It's one of my top 10 books of all time.
So that's
Is
the one
that
book I
important?
haven't read of the last three. So I'm gonna read that one for sure.
Hey, bro, uh, give yourself some time to go through it because you're gonna need to process some stuff. I can promise you that.
Okay. All right.
I've read the book twice. I'm gonna read it again. I'm gonna read it a third time to get ready for the discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I read a couple of his other ones, man. So I'm a fan of Acuff for sure.
And then last but certainly not least, going into the December and in the last month of the year, we'll be dealing with sitting at the feet of Rabbi Jesus. So I'm really looking forward to this, and it's just going to be some great discussions. Um, for those of you that are listening to this on LinkedIn and Facebook and even YouTube, the link to join our email list is in the description of the video. So and we'll also put it here so you can grab a hold of that and go from there. Pastor John, what's been really fast before we jump into today's book? What's been the thing that has stood out to you this year from this book club?
The thing that stood out for me this year, especially for some of the folks that are participating with us, is that when you read in community, you you got accountability to be able to get it done. There are some people who are non-readers who've joined this club and they are reading books every single month with us. And when you have people around you who are reading together, it's just like going to the gym, right? You're just gonna have folks who are gonna keep you accountable, and you're gonna read even if you're a non-reader. You know, both of us are readers,
Yeah.
but the encouraging thing for me is seeing folks who are non-readers who have come out and who have read 9 books this year, more than they probably read over the past several years, which is great so far. So I'm appreciating that. What about you?
Yeah, I think what's interesting, what's been intriguing to me, like I know that we prayed about and were strategic about when we placed each book, but I've been blown away at how timely they have been.
Mm,
Like it's one thing for us to plan, it's another thing for us to feel like, or for me to feel like, man, like God really put his wind behind the order of these books and what was happening in culture, what was happening in the world, what was happening in
mm.
my life and other people's lives, et cetera, on the topics that we've been able to cover. So it's been really good, man. It's been really amazing also to see um, just how practical also the
Mhm.
books have been.
Yeah,
They've covered a lot of content, but they've been very practical. So I've been excited about it.
that's good. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, man. All right, so let's jump into this book. If Jesus gave a TED talk, I should have already found it, but I'll circle back later. I actually had Pastor Charles Stone on my podcast a couple years back,
Oh,
and
nice.
I'll put the link to that podcast discussion. Actually, he's been on a couple of times, but specifically about this book, he was on, and so I'll put that link in the recording, in the saved recording, later on down the road.
Mm,
Um, this book is for anybody at any point that is planning on communicating in front of an audience.
that's it, man.
At any point, you plan on connecting to an audience.
Yep.
Um,
Not just for pastors. It's for teachers and classrooms. It's communication principles, period. So yeah, it's for anyone who communicates.
if you do speaking for corporate America, or if you do workshops for your team at work, or if you do if you're leading in the community in any way, shape, or form, if you ever have to put a PowerPoint together, anything of that sort, the thing that Charles Stone does, first of all, he masterfully integrates neuroscience, psychology, practical communication tips, and Bible all at the same time. It's
Mhm.
masterful. It
Yeah.
is absolutely masterful how he does it.
Yep. Yep. And you really generally don't see all those kind of mixed together. Talk
Yeah,
about somebody who does Bible and neuroscience. I'm listening.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
listening.
yeah. The first time I read this book, Pastor John, I walked away from the book saying the book practices what he preaches in the book.
For sure. Like it walks through what he's saying he wants us to do in the book itself. And that's what I was gonna say today. I was like, man, as I was going back through it, I'm like, bro, he's showing and then telling, hey, here's what I'm gonna do. And he does what he's gonna do. And that's what the book is all about.
Yeah. In my less learning days, when I was less of a learner, I would have picked up a book like this and saw where he might put some summaries at the end of each chapter and be like, oh, okay, I'm read the summaries.
Read the summaries.
But then when you actually start reading the book, you realize you can get the summaries, but there's so much meat that you got to process through in each chapter.
In between.
The summary is just like the appetizer.
Right. You ain't even get to the meal yet.
Yeah.
Don't get full off appetizers.
Yeah. So really fast, just as an overview, a flyover really fast for the people that may be listening in. On page 9, he there's a paragraph there on page 9 that I think he does a great. It can serve as a great summary for the book. And if you'll indulge me just for a moment, Pastor John, I just want to read this summary really fast because I think it gives a great umbrella. He says, research informs us that when communicators learn how the brain works and how to apply brain insight to communication, learning, and teaching, we become better communicators. Mm-hmm. For the neuroscience of learning provides one of the key foundations for this book. The other thing I thought about through this, and we both are preachers as well. I don't want to get on a soapbox on this, but I think oftentimes preachers will focus so much on in understanding the Bible and preaching the Bible better that they don't focus on preaching better. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like communicating, like preaching as a communication strategy is what I'm trying to say.
That's right, man. Yeah. Exegesis is the passage and the people. And part of the neuroscience he's talking about is going to be audience and people as well. And I don't think pastors often make that connection. Like a lot of people dig deep into the text. I'm just like, man, you have a whole audience you got to think about. And these principles of neuroscience help you think about the audience for sure.
Yeah. So there's 8 questions there that he says, you really need to be thinking about these 8 crucial questions. And the 8 questions really kind of center around the whole thing that kind of undergirds the book, which is the healthy learning platter. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, let me mention, in the book, he has a link. Now, I'm going to give y'all this link for the people that's listening to this. But if you haven't read the book,
buy the book.
This link is not going to help you because you're going to see the images and the concepts, but you're not going to be able to tie it together. So charlesstone.com/TED freebies. And I'll put that in the link as well. Put that link in the chat as well.
But buy the book and read the book because the freebies ain't going to help you till you read the book.
That part. Where do you want to take your audience?
Yeah.
How can you get your audience to really listen to you? Mm-hmm. Why should your audience listen? The so what question. How can you beat the competition vying for the attention of your audience? How can you help your audience feel your message? How can you help your message stick in the minds and the hearts of your audience better? How can you help those in your audience believe they can change and do what you suggest? And then what does your audience need to do after your speech, sermon, lesson, or training session?
Yeah.
So, yeah, man.
Yeah.
All right.
I feel like, okay, so we're about to walk through the book.
Yeah, but go ahead. You feel like.
But when he's going through those 8 questions, like it really takes you through the principles of communication strategy that go all the way back to Aristotle that he talks about in the introduction. And so I could group those by the principles that Aristotle talks about: ethos, logos, and pathos, right? You got the credibility of the speaker, you got the logic and the data, and then you have the emotional appeal. That's that feeling piece. And so any good speaker needs to carry audiences through those 3 pieces. And any communications class, Foundations of Communication, is going to start with Aristotle. It's going to start right there.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So these 8 principles fall into those categories. Remember, I told you I'm a categories person. So like fall into each one of those categories as I'm thinking.
I love that. I love that. They sort of undergird the 8 principles that he lays out in the book.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, man. Let's jump into it because time is of the essence, and we got some meat to go over.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yep. So where you want to start? Introduction,
Principle
first
number
chapter.
1.
Yeah, let's start with clarity. Clarity, man, is essentially, man, know where you're going and where you want to take people.
Yes,
That's
sir.
the essence of it, right?
Right.
That's the core principle behind clarity. And man, this is a communication principles for everybody. But bro, I wish more preachers knew this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you don't know where you want to take people, and then here we are 5 hours later, and we like, man, we just went on a trip we didn't even know anything about.
Yeah. 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 Man, the amazing thing about this is that so I don't know what your seminary or training experience was like, but some of the classes that we had in seminary, they drilled into us, come up with your statement, your key statement that
Yep.
will guide the entire message,
For sure.
which is not as
Yep.
easy as it sounds.
No, it's not.
And
It's not, because
no.
everything else has to flow from that statement.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So some people call it main idea, thesis, central truth, whatever you want to call it, big idea. You gotta have that before you
Yeah.
even start or begin to shape and craft any communications message.
Yeah. He makes the reference in the book that even in media, he says every screenwriter writes a movie or a TV show script around a clear through line.
Yep.
Right.
I like that.
So
I like
all
that
of,
one.
all of your points, illustrations, explanations would then be like the branches attached to that trunk. And then he says, summarize your through line in a single sentence. Watch this, man. This is hard. Of less than 15 words.
That's the part that gets folks, because they be like, and here's the crazy part about it. That's the thing that, okay, I'm going to talk about preaching and teaching, but it happens across the board.
Yeah.
We want to use so many words, and we're like, if I simplify it, it's going to feel too simple. But people aren't going to take that away, man. That's what Brian Chappell talks about in his book, preaching book. He says, man, if it doesn't pass that 3 a.m. test, if I can't wake somebody up at 3 a.m. and say, what was the main point of that message?
Yeah.
Then you ain't clear enough. 15 words or less is tough, though, Pastor Christopher.
Hard. It's hard.
It's tough.
So I just told you before we came on camera, before we came on live, I just told you about a message that I'm doing in a couple of days. Just talked about it, showed you the image and all that stuff.
Yep.
That message, my through line has 19 words. And I've spent an hour working that down to the 19 words.
Wow.
An hour.
And you got it down to 19, but it's been an hour to get to 19.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Yes,
wow.
sir.
Wow.
Yes, and at this point, I'm so clear on what I'm saying that I'm okay with the 19.
You said you good with the 19?
I'm good with the 19. I am good with it. Because the 15, listen, it's just not going to work this time. It's just not going to work.
Wow.
I love
it.
Go ahead.
What'd you think about the section on concept maps and being able to come up with concept maps?
I love it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Right? Because so I had somebody say to me, actually a couple months ago at our church, they said that they after service. So at our church, we spend time in the lobby after each service, right? Shaking hands and greeting people and all that stuff. And this guy, he and his wife had been a part of the church maybe about 2 or 3 months. And so I don't know them, closely, but enough to see their face, know them, and greet them and all that stuff, And he said to me, he asked a question. He said, "Did you used to be an educator?" And I said, "Actually, I was." He said, "Man, I could tell." He's like, "Every time you preach, it's like I'm on this ride with you, but then you always are giving me a framework or an image or a picture or an idea that I can walk away with.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, Pastor John, you know, the other thing that really concretized that for me, being a youth pastor.
Man, I've heard that a lot from a lot of youth pastors. Yeah.
I was a youth pastor for 12 years, man. And I figured out real fast that, man, if you can't make this thing make sense to a 5 or a 15-year-old, you ain't got it.
Yeah. Not gonna happen, man. Not gonna happen.
And they and 5 and 15-year-olds don't care anything about cliches or, you know, emotional statements that adults will generally respond to sometimes, or you know, you ain't got no Hammond backing you up with the kids. You know, and all of that. You can't keep, like, you can't use a lot of fillers, you know, and you got to be clear, concise. You got to make that thing make some sense.
Yeah, and it helps shape your message too, man.
Yeah.
You know, Stone talks about this idea and concept of, and you don't really see it practiced often because people feel like they're giving away spoilers. But he talks about tell them where you're gonna go.
Yes.
And then tell them after you tell them where you're gonna go. So basically, you give away all your points.
Yes.
And then you take them on the journey.
Yes.
Now, some folks will be like, all right, if I give them 3 points, then they're just gonna be waiting for me to get to the next point. But dude, when I travel with my kids and I tell them where we're going, I don't get the are we there yet? There's so many people in the audience who are like, are we there yet? Because they don't know where they're going.
Yeah.
With anybody who's speaking. But if you tell them where you're going and you tell them about the stops along the way, they're going to appreciate the stops along the way as opposed to the destination.
Yeah. You know who does this masterfully, and I'm always careful about
shouting out.
I'm careful, shouting out names, because then people get into the weeds of, well, I don't like his theology on this. I don't like her.
Right.
That ain't what I'm talking about right now.
Right. Communication is communication.
Listen, I'm gonna tell you, there's 2 people. Well, I'll give you 3 names.
Okay.
In this case, all men. All men. There's some women that I could probably name if I thought about it long enough. And this is not an endorsement of them as well. Anyways, I'll just say it. One person is Andy Stanley.
Yep.
You listen to Andy Stanley, Andy will say within the first 5 to 10 minutes of his message, here's what I'm talking about today. If you're not a believer, some of what I'm going to say to you today doesn't apply to you, but you're welcome to listen in. So at that point, even if you're not a believer, you're like, well, dog, okay, well, what is he getting ready to say?
Right. I'm gonna listen now. Shoot, I'm gonna listen now. And he is a 15 words or less main idea person. He's gonna give you 9 words, 10 words, maybe.
All day.
And everything before the comma is gonna rhyme with what's after the comma, like parallelism. He's got that down pat.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You know who else? Former President Obama. Listen to him as a speaker, like from a communication standpoint. Not politics. I'm not talking about politics, but I'm saying from a communication standpoint.
Yeah.
Whoever is his speechwriter needs an Emmy. You hear what I'm saying? They need some sort of award, because in the first 10 minutes of him talking, he's going to give you a statement or an idea where he's saying, basically, this is what I'm getting ready to say to you.
Yep.
Stay with me for a little bit, and I'm watching, you know, and he's going to take you on that journey. And it's like, brother, it is masterful.
He weaves that thing, man, for sure. I don't know who the speechwriter is either, but they did a good job.
Yes, sir. It is absolutely masterful. So there's another principle in section 1, principle 1. It talks about clarity that I think is worth us mentioning. You mentioned about the concept maps, and I think that's important. I believe in those. Let me say this. This is not, he didn't say this directly in the book, but when you think about what concept maps are, people that are going to use concept maps, you've got to get proficient at creating images on screen.
Yep.
Right. And that's using finding an image that encapsulates what you're trying to convey. That's creating an image. If you have the flexibility to have a graphic designer to communicate what's in your head and your message, then do that. et cetera, et cetera. If you're good at PowerPoint, use Power, whatever it is, Canva, all of that. You gotta get proficient at it.
Mm.
There's actually a book that I have that's called Slideology.
Yeah,
It's
I
called
got that one
Slideology.
too. It's like
Yeah,
it's only in print because it's so good. So yeah,
yeah,
I got that too for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
They don't make it. They
There's
don't
a
make a
way to make slides that's compelling. Don't put 1,000 words on the slide. Ain't nobody reading all that. And if it's on the slide, why do they want to hear you repeat what's on the slide?
and if you can replace words with an image, that's going to always be better.
Yeah. Always. Every single time is going to be better. Every single time.
Yeah. So he talks about this difference between gist versus verbatim.
Yep.
And essentially he's saying that people actually can remember a message better if they can give you the gist of the message versus verbatim statements. And
Yep.
so while I think it's important for us to come up with sticky statements, I do think it's important for us to have enough clarity that people can walk away with the gist of what we're saying. And so even that through line statement or that thesis statement, like you mentioned earlier, if you repeat that a couple times throughout the message, then that gives people the gist. Like,
It
okay,
is.
what
Yep.
man, what did Pastor John talk about Sunday? Well, I can't tell you everything he said, but I do know that he said dot 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 dot, and they're probably going to be repeating in their own words, in some way, shape, or form, that through line or that thesis statement that you said 3 or 4 times.
That's it, man. That's it. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So clarify the main takeaway, create a concept map, and then capitalize on primacy and recency memory bias, which is people will remember the first thing and generally the last thing that you
Last
said.
thing. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So teach your new most important stuff first and then revisit it toward the end, he says.
Yes,
Which I
sir.
think is important for sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. We got principle number 2.
Number 2.
Yes, sir.
Attention. We're called to peak interest. He has 3 key principles here, but he starts with the goldfish conversation, which I thought was
And then he calls
interesting.
it a neuro myth. I was like, come on with these words, man.
He starts with the article that says you now have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. 2,000 people were studied and showed that their attention span was no longer than a goldfish attention span, which is 9 seconds long. So think about that. People can't lock in for more than 9 seconds unless you recatch them with a hook. And we wonder why so many people check out on talks or communications, because, man, our culture has so many things that are vying for attention that he's going to talk about later. But just think about that idea that our attention spans are that short. I think that was a good way to be able to open this chapter and principle on attention and getting attention, because it's a limited resource in today's culture.
Yeah. Well, and so what he actually says though is that the story about the goldfish, the anecdote, he says it swept through the internet and still is persistent today, but it's false. It's a false statement about the 8 seconds. He said 8 seconds actually reflected the average time a person spent on a web page before moving to another.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I love this. I'm just going to read this quick statement here that I think is pretty solid. He says, God gave us the ability to pay attention and select where we put it because our brains can't process everything our senses perceive from our environment. And here's the statement: we simply can't digest it all.
Yep.
So I think we've got to be willing to help manage people's attention through the journey of our speaking.
Yeah. Yep.
Giving people even mental commercial breaks during your messages or your presentations.
And you know what those are? You know what those are? Stories.
What?
Like you have them in the text, even if it's a narrative text. You have to take a break. Tell a story.
Yeah.
Illustrations are the ones that give you the mental break. That's when people lock back in. Like I've seen it happen. Like people will lock back in when you start telling the story. Start with the illustration.
Yep. Or make them laugh. Do something funny.
Yeah.
Right. Say something funny. Or
Yep.
I've even seen some speakers do something like this, Pastor John, where they say, I just had a thought. This has nothing to do with what I'm talking about today, but let me share this with y'all.
Mm.
And it's almost like a literal intentional diversion because I
Mm-hmm.
already know I've been loading you down and your mind is already racing.
Yeah. So it takes them off the path for a second, jolts the memory, and gets them back on track. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think the point, the part of the one of the takeaways that I got from this chapter here too is sometimes we don't give people enough credit for their attention.
Mm.
Meaning, if I'm giving you new information, or I'm challenging a paradigm, or I'm challenging what you may have already been thinking, it's hard for me to amen if I'm in the middle of a deep thought.
Yep. Yep.
And so if a communicator is addicted to an amen, you're
Mm.
robbing your people of giving deep thought to actually what you're saying. So
Mm.
then the question becomes, are you more interested in the amen? Are you more interested in the attention, sustained attention for them processing what you're giving them?
Mm. That's good. That's good. Yep.
Amen.
Yep. He talks about this idea of gaining and maintaining attention.
Yep.
So he says, when you deliver your talk, all three of these components of attention come into play in your learner's brain. Listen, gain their attention. Listen to this, focus their attention. Keep listening to this, maintain their attention. He
Yep.
says that this sequence happens repeatedly in listener's brain during every talk that you give. And Jesus did this real masterfully. He talks about that in some of the parables that he did, and said that people hung on his words.
Yes.
Man, can people say that about your talks? Like that people hang on your words? I know people gonna be like, that's Jesus. But no, he's using communication principles, which Stone talks about throughout the book. But I like that idea of gaining their attention and maintaining their attention. Because when you gain it, you're not done.
Yeah.
You got to keep it
Yeah.
and maintain it.
Yeah. 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 I thought about this too. And this is for people that communicate to similar audiences consistently.
Mm.
My impression is that people should be able to see your journey of progress as a communicator if
Yep.
they've been around you for a while.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Novelty and curiosity. Like they shouldn't know all of the story and know exactly where you're going every time.
That's it, man. Yeah. That's it. Like, oh, here you go again.
Yeah.
And that's what he
They should
talks
know
about. That's where he talks about the attention grabbers in as a practice, right? You got to have something that really grabs the attention.
Yeah.
And that's part of that is novelty. Some of that is quotations. Some of that
Stories.
is storytelling, right? Illustrations. And I think a lot of folks don't focus on that stuff because it takes work to collect them and
Yep.
to retain them.
Yep.
I can't begin to tell you how many illustrations I've lost because I haven't written them down. but they're so helpful with getting attention and grabbing attention and sustaining attention that we have to be able to use them and collect them and put them as part of our message to get that attention.
Yeah. Even he
Do you
says,
open with a story for
huh?
do you open with a story with your sermons?
I change it up.
Okay.
I change it up. Sometimes I'll open with a story. Sometimes I'll open with an image.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll open with a question.
Mm.
But I change it up that creates some sort of, which we'll get to in a minute on the next point. My aim within the first couple of minutes is just to sort of create some sort of connection.
Yeah.
Before I will readily admit that I have been prone to have longer openings. They probably, like my seminary professor just says, like, these introductions are just too long.
Right. Sometimes it depends on where you are, though, Pastor Christopher. Right? If you're visiting a church, you have to establish that trust and that credibility. So it takes time to get that introduction out. Right? If it's your people, then you're already there. You may have to only take 3 to 5 minutes. Right? So for me, it just depends on where I am and the context as well.
Okay, so let's sit on that for just a second. Because my argument is even if you have an audience where you feel like it's your people,
Mhm.
you're not always preaching to them because they're going to always be with you.
You saying that there are other people present who need to be able to establish that credibility. I understand. So I would say to that that if most of the people there in the room are, there is a causal connection to the other folks that say, hey, if
Mm,
so and so, if there's a trust here, then there's an openness for other people. Now, I don't say I don't do it all the time. Like when I do open with story, first of all, if I'm telling a personal story, I'm not the hero ever, right? It's always going to be about something I've done that was just jacked up. It's like I'm
yeah,
just like y'all. So
yeah,
that helps the people, even if it's a shorter story, it helps them to understand Pastor John is human and he's dealing with some of the same stuff and he's going to show us how he worked through it or show us how to work through it. So I
mm,
think that's also helpful as well.
that's good. That's good. That's good. That point about not being the hero, I think, is really powerful because people automatically assume when they're listening to something, oftentimes, that they're excluded from the possibility of what you're preaching.
That's right, man. That's good. Yep.
And, and so when you can say to them, "No, I was right there with you," or "I am right there with you," it
Yeah.
humanizes the text. It humanizes what you're saying, and I think it adds credibility to what you're saying as well.
That's
Uh,
right, man.
so,
Yeah.
all right, this is good stuff, bro.
Yeah.
Uh, principle number three. Principle number three is about affinity. Come on with the bars.
Uh-huh. Affinity. Affinity. It's all
Create.
about creating connection.
Yeah, create connection. Um, this is about knowing your material. This is about knowing your material.
Oh boy.
This is
There's a
about
lot to be said about that.
say it. We got to say it today, bro. We got to
Pastor
say
Christopher, let me tell you something. There's nothing that frustrates me more. If you're preaching a text or if you're talking on any subject matter, you need to be the subject matter expert in the room. Even if you're preaching, I'm talking about in the preaching context, even if you're preaching to people who have been doing this for 40 years, you've been sitting with the text this week longer than them. So you need to at least know your material
yeah,
and know your text.
yeah,
That's the thing that frustrates me the most, man. Is
yeah,
like when I know that this thing's been thrown together and you don't even know the material. It's like because that doesn't create no connection with us now,
yeah,
with the audience because you're fumbling and there's no clarity. It goes back to clarity, and that clarity brings about a lack of affinity.
yeah.
What about you?
Um, trying to think about how I whittle all of this down that's running through my head. Because I don't want to be disrespectful, but I don't think people realize when they come to present information and they're unprepared how insulting that is to the intelligence of the people that you're presenting the information
To the
to.
listeners, yeah,
It's
I
it's
totally agree.
insulting.
Yeah,
It's
totally agree. Yeah, yep.
it's flat out disrespectful.
Mm,
And I would even say for those that are communicating the Bible, it's also disrespectful to God that He's given you an opportunity and you didn't properly prepare and engage that opportunity because you don't know how somebody's life may be shifted, right?
yeah,
Uh,
that's good.
yeah,
And in addition to that, Pastor Christopher, knowing the material creates trust. Going back to what we said, that you don't have to do in storytelling. Like
yep,
when you're teaching with that type of authority, and you're like, man, I know this. People are gonna be like, man, this this person knows this. I need to listen in. I need to be locked in.
yep,
And that creates the trust that you don't have to necessarily create on the other side of that, trying to figure out, okay, how are they going to get them to trust me as a person? Just know your stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just know it.
This also, let me tell you how this also bothers me, um, because I've been in business settings as well,
Mm,
where people know the concept of the material,
mm,
but they don't know how to explain the concepts.
yeah.
So
Yep.
there's a disconnect,
Yeah.
right? Like there's no plain speak at all in what they're communicating. And so I just like you should know your material enough
Mm.
that when you're communicating it to somebody else, you can then communicate it to them in a way that they can grab a hold of it. Because if you're the only one that's excited about what you're presenting, but it's not connected with the people, there's no point in it.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
no point in it. Like, you just wasted an hour of my time. It's like my I may get in trouble for this, but so my first my first class as a freshman in college
Mm.
was college biology. And at the time, and I since got to know him as an individual. He's an amazing individual. I did some work with him when I was on campus, served on some committees with him, even traveled with him on a couple of trips representing the university and all that stuff. But the class would start Ruby Diamond Auditorium on campus. This was the auditorium would seat 2,500 people, I think, or something like that. Some
Mm.
number. The room is full. Okay.
Mhm.
This was
Mhm.
our first class as a freshman. Everybody had to take this class as a freshman. It happens at 8:15 in the morning, and it goes from 8:15 to 9:15. And at 8:15, he would start talking.
Wow.
He would not look up until 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. Wow.
And I'm sitting here, man, and I'm locked in because I'm like, oh, this is college. I got to pay attention. After like the third week, I'm like, what is he talking about? I read the stuff. I read the book.
Mhm.
I did the
Mhm.
work. But I'm
Yep.
like, man, he's talking, he's using all these big words and he's not connected with us. And I'm like, this makes
Mm.
sense. Now,
Yeah.
I did end up getting an A in the class. Thank God for that. But the lectures were no good.
Yeah. That's
The
good,
lab
man.
is what, we had a lab. So the class was Monday and Wednesday, and then we had a lab on Friday. And
Mm.
the lab was a saving grace for me. But the point that I think we're making here is that as a communicator, you owe it to your audience, which actually deals with the second point of this, to not only know your material, but know it in a way that you can present it to them, in a palatable way.
Yes. Which to your point, you also have to know your audience, not just your community. I'm not just your material, but your audience. He says, imagine you're in the audience and let that drive what you plan to say.
Yes, sir.
Like put yourself in the pews, put yourself in the auditorium, in the seats,
Yep.
and then let that drive what you're going to say. Like when you now are sitting there thinking, okay, putting a face, a name to the message, now you're trying to figure out what am I trying to communicate to the audience, knowing what they're coming here to get from me.
Yep.
Makes a world of difference.
Yep. You not only put yourself in the audience and ask yourself, what questions would I be asking if I were hearing this?
Mm.
But you're also, even in preparation, and this is one of the things that I do. Here's a hack for me that I do,
Mm.
especially if I'm preaching in a place where I know the people.
Yeah.
I'm imagining real people, their faces, as I'm preparing the message. And if I'm presenting what I'm presenting, what challenges would they have receiving and living out what I'm teaching?
Mm. Yeah.
What's the obstacles for them embracing and living out this message?
That's good, man.
And
Man,
so
I
you'll
would.
appreciate. So I approach it as a lawyer. I got to defend my case,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
I'm thinking about Lorna, or I'm thinking about Talia, or I'm thinking about Sandra or Brittany, or I'm thinking about Cliff, or I'm thinking about Steve. And I'm looking at
Mm.
their faces as I'm working through this, and I'm thinking about their life experiences and circumstances. I'm like, I know this message is going to be incredible for them, but what's the questions that they're asking, and what's the objections that they're going to have? So when I get up to defend my case, I can already anticipate their questions.
That's good, man. I was preaching on the widow Anna in Luke, and I imagined I was like, maybe somebody here who lost their loved one. Man, when I got to the end of the message, because so my message about Anna was like, keep showing up. She showed up every day. Just keep showing up. Keep showing, even in all the pain, all the heartbreak, et cetera, et cetera. This woman came up after service. She was weeping. She just lost her husband. And she was like, man, Pastor John, I felt like you were just speaking directly to me. And we baptized her about 3 months later.
You sent me that
Yes.
story, yeah.
Man, that was so like just thinking about as I was preparing the message, I'm like, man, there may be somebody who's lost their loved one. who needs to hear this particular point in the message.
Yeah.
And if you imagine the audience, man, it'll be so much more helpful for you to create that affinity there. That was her first time coming, Pastor Christopher. First time. Crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Dr.
know your
Jerusha
audience.
Neal, yeah. Dr. Jerusha Neal, who's a preaching professor, says you need to study your presentation, your message, and the text so much that you can drill down to the secondary question that people are asking.
That's good.
Not the first layer question, but what's the question underneath that?
I love that, man. I love that. Yeah, I love that. Pastor Christopher, we about to get in trouble, man.
Because time is gone.
We only on principle number 3. But like you said, there's so much meat in here, man. Just so much. There's so much. Oh,
it is. Can we really quickly? Can we talk about humor before we leave this principle?
Yeah, for sure.
Because some people try to be funny and they're not funny.
Listen to me. I see it all the time, and I'm like, if you ain't funny, don't try to be funny.
Yeah,
like just don't try to be funny.
And if you're not authentically engaging in that way, then just
don't. It's okay. There are other ways that you can connect with the audience, but humor happens in a way that is natural, is organic. Like you don't have to force humor. Like people who are comedians, they don't force it. They're just comedians. Yeah. And if you're a pastor or preacher that can tell a funny story, do that. That's fine. Like I tell funny stories all the time. But if you can't do it, just don't.
So can I let you in on a quick secret?
Yeah.
So a lot of people say that I'm funny when I preach, but I never try to be.
That's the other part. Like some of them, you just don't try to be, and they be laughing. You be like, "Oh shoot!"
Yeah. So here's what I was here to tell you the secret, right? Anytime I've ever told a joke, it was never predetermined.
It just happened.
Yeah,
man.
I've never predetermined a joke.
It just happened. All the time. It happens all the time, Pastor Christopher. For real, happens all the time.
The last time that I predetermined to try to tell a joke, man, that thing fell so flat. I was like, I'll never do that again.
And then it comes to you in the moment, though. That's when you know it's like that's the Lord helping you to kind of create that humor moment.
Yeah.
And it's just something that you got to do organically. Like you can't force it. So my
wife and kids both say that you are hilarious when you're not trying to be. So
exactly.
I'm gonna stay in that vein.
Just stay right there. Stay right there.
All right. Principle 4. Man, this chapter was this was a nerdy chapter.
It was. Yep.
This was a nerdy chapter in a good way. He even has this image here, and this is on the website. Can y'all see that?
Yep. With the 5 senses.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you got to think about now this is really hard because I've actually tried to practice this, that when you're delivering a message or some sort, man, how do I, because the more of the 5 senses that I can touch,
that's right,
the more memorable the message is.
That's right. Yep.
And that's hard, man.
It's tough, man. It's tough. You know, the hearing, you got that all the time, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, what about the tactile? What about the smell? That requires masterful storytelling and imagery as well. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just so that people can, even if they can't taste it, they can taste it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Even if they can't smell it, they can smell it. And so that takes a lot, bro. It does. It does take a lot.
Yeah.
But it's helpful. As many as you can touch on, people gonna remember those messages and remember those images.
Yeah. So I love this sentence right here. He said Jesus masterfully blended the visual and the verbal for his learners. He
Yeah.
often used object lessons by referring to or pointing out common everyday items that people immediately knew, such as light, eyes, grain, flowers, birds, breads, gates, fruit, wolves, a yoke, fishing, doctors, crosses, a plow, vines, etc. When he made reference to them, he engaged his listeners' visual working memory. He then
Mm.
engaged their verbal working memory, when he explained how that item related to the spiritual. He says Warren Wiersbe wrote this. He turned his listeners' ears into eyes so that they could see the truth and respond to it.
Man, I love that quote. His listeners' ears turned into eyes so they could see the truth. Man, Worsby is a different monster. He's a different
Next
monster.
level.
But that's a good paragraph. I also highlighted that one because it shows and demonstrates that Stone is talking about Jesus as the ultimate example, but he uses everyday materials and content and stuff. And so, even though we're not in an agrarian culture, we have to find images that our people can connect to as well,
Yeah.
and be able to connect with, to make sure, and honoring the text at the same time, make sure they understand what those principles mean in a visual way.
I think there's let's go to the other side of this discussion for a moment, because I think that there can be a detriment in always using hot topics
Yeah,
to
for
try to
sure.
connect stories, right? Or to try to
Yeah,
tell a story.
because you try to force them.
Yeah. And sometimes if you're talking about the thing that's the latest in the news, like let's just say, today is Friday and some story breaks tonight or some story breaks tomorrow. And then I try to insert that into my message for Sunday. Really, the story is incomplete that I'm now trying to build my message or point off of. And let's just say that the way that they reported it on Saturday when things happen, there's an entirely different narrative that comes out a week later.
Yeah.
Now my credibility is at stake because I've tried to build principles off of this connection point that's just not relevant.
Just not relevant. Now, to that point, there are going to be moments where we have to speak into,
Yeah.
like the day after a 9/11, the day after a Michael Brown, something like that, where we have to speak into those cultural moments, even when you don't have enough information, but you have to make sure that you using facts and that you're being wise in the way that you approach topics like that.
So I think there's two different things here, right? Because in some ways we're talking about you as the messenger,
Yep.
and then we're talking about the message.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the context, so let's just say I'm going to speak at a conference of communicators or a conference of business leaders, and something the likes of or the level of a 9/11 happens the day before, but the conference is still going on. Everybody's kind of doing their thing. It will be a miss for me. Now, my message has nothing to do with that, but
Right.
it would be a miss for me to, at least as the messenger, open up by saying, I recognize today that many people have mixed emotions that we're carrying into this day, or something along those lines. And so I wanted to simply acknowledge where everybody may be, the headspace that they may be, the impact of lives or whatever. I want to take just 30 seconds and acknowledge that and give everybody a moment of silence, right? And then ease into. Now I may have to adjust how I'm easing into that message somehow, but the point that I'm making is, as a messenger, I'm not so hung up on my message that I'm aloof to where my audience is.
That's right. Yep. That's good.
Man, he talks a lot about cognitive load in
Load.
here.
Yep.
This,
like you said, this is the nerdy chapter.
Yeah, man. And this matters. This absolutely
matters. It does. Yeah.
All right. Okay. What you want to do, man? Because we at principle 5.
We at number 5, man. All right, and we got 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, maybe. So have we named all the principles yet?
Let's name them all.
Let's name them all, and then let's give like kind of a big idea for each one of them, briefly. So I'll do the first one. Principle 5 is durability, which is meant to stimulate long-term memory. And then remember that question from earlier, how can you make your message stick? So this is the stickiness of your message. He talks about making yourself have some sticky techniques, which means you have to test it. You got to be able to test your technique. And then he also talks about being able to create aha moments. I want to land there for that chapter. Like you have to create moments in your message where the light bulb goes off for people. And that's going to help it be sticky. Oftentimes for me, that help happens through illustrations and stories. And so there's a connection to what we talked about before. But if there's an aha moment, I can tell you, people come out to me and say, I appreciate that message because you told the story about fishing and the bobber. And I have a bobber at the house. And every time I see a bobber, like you said, every time I see this, it reminds me of what you taught and what you preached. So create aha moments and sticky moments.
Tension creates aha moments as well.
Yep.
So if you provide a solution to a tension, it creates aha moments. So for example, I was at a workshop last week, and this speaker was presenting, and he was talking about bad theology when it comes to the church and money and finances. And he said, oftentimes, people use that verse to demonize money about, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom.
Yeah.
He said, I got a question for y'all. Why do we give that verse to believers? And he literally just sat there for like 3 minutes. And I was like, what?
That's creating tension for sure.
Bro.
Yeah.
When I say 3 minutes, like he literally stood there quiet for 3 minutes.
Yep.
And then he says, think about this. He said, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom. He said, the rich man is not in the kingdom yet. So the issue is not that he has the money. The issue is that he's not in the kingdom yet.
That's pointing out the tension in the text. He didn't create the tension. It's already there.
It's already there, man. Oh, God.
And many of Jesus' teaching, the tension's already there. Just point it out. Just point it out. I like that. All right, principle 6. What you got?
Principle 6 is emotion. That's engaging the heart. Engaging the heart. I'm just going to give them the way he gave them out in terms of summary. Leverage emotional learning. Limit cognitive dissonance. So if the audience has to work hard to make sense of what you're saying, they're not going to work hard. That's essentially what he said. If they got to work hard to make sense and create order and all that stuff around what you're saying, they're just not going to do that. And then, to your point earlier about stories, you got to learn how to lead with well-placed stories. So this is about pacing. This is about spacing. This is about placement to kind of make sure that you created that connection so that people, can connect with what you're saying. And, this is where, talking to preachers for a moment, this is where preachers have to be careful, because while we are not motivational speakers, we can't be void of motivation and encouragement.
That's good. Yep.
Yeah.
I like that, man. I like that.
Yeah. All right.
Principle 7, mindset. Cultivate confidence. How do you help your learners believe that they can do what you suggest from your talk? He talks about avoiding the big neuro myths. I'm only going to talk about one. Some students are left brain, some are right brain. He said everybody use all their brain if you allow them to use all their brain. So avoid the neuro myths. Act with a contagious spirit. How do you help cultivate confidence in the mindset? Man, just have a contagious spirit. Listen, who was it that said a man on fire in the pulpit or a woman on fire in the pulpit will create fire in others? Man, be contagious with what you preach and what you teach. And then finally, accelerate your listeners' personal motivation. Find a way to accelerate the way that they are motivated to be able to do what you are saying to do.
Yeah. Yep. So good. The last one is transfer. Principle 8 is about transfer, and that is stimulate life application. Now he uses the phrase clarify the now what. I like to say clarify the so what.
So what? Okay,
so
I do too. Yeah.
So what? You create cues to applying this, in your life. I love this sentence right here. He says, lasting transformation does not happen overnight. Real transformation can be messy, risky, and emotional. One
Mm.
extensive study of adult learners discovered 10 phases in the transformative process required for learning. He says the learner faces a disorientating dilemma, self-examines, critically assesses assumptions, recognizes the connection between their discontentment and the process of transformation. Number 5, explores options for new roles, responsibilities, and actions. Number 6, plans a course of action. Number 7, acquires new knowledge and skills to implement the plan. Number 8, provisionally tries out new roles. Number 9, builds competence and self-confidence in those new roles and relationships. And then 10, reintegrates those new perspectives into their life.
New life. Yeah.
Process of transformation. So then you create clear cues. I don't have time to go through all the cues because he gives like 7 or 8 of these that I think are just all really powerful. Physical and emotional reward, and all those kinds of things. But then I love how he ended it with that third phase of transfer, stimulate life application. He says, count on the work of the Holy Spirit, man.
That's a way to close.
Count, bro.
He's a preacher.
This was a
That's a way to close. I love this. Says the Holy Spirit is the ultimate memory maker and memory retriever.
Yes,
like,
sir.
Man, that right job there. Yeah, that's it.
His job is he didn't guide us into all truth.
That's what Jesus said. It's better for me to go away.
Yeah, man.
That just made me happy. Yeah, this is good, man. This is a good book, man, on communication. Like for any communicator. I like the way he presents it in a way that says, I'm gonna practice what I'm preaching. Like I'm literally doing in the book what I want you to do with your life. And rarely do you see authors do that. Some of them principleize everything. He's practicing it and presenting you with principles. And I appreciate him for that.
Like, I don't want to tell his story too much, but he writes a lot about Bible and neuroscience and God and the mind. And what put him on that journey was actually some challenge that he and his wife walked through with his daughter and her mind.
Wow.
And so he went back.
Did you cover that in your podcast?
Yes.
Man, let's make sure we share that with folks, man, because I think that'd be powerful, kind of a companion piece for it. Yeah. That's so good.
This was so good, man. We could have talked another 45 minutes.
I mean, we were on principle 3 about 45 minutes in. And I don't think next month is going to get any better. As we're talking about compassion and conviction and politics, man. And it's so rich. There are so many good principles in there. We're going to walk through it chapter by chapter 2. And I pray it's going to be a blessing to people, bro.
Yeah, this is going to be hard.
Yeah.
This is hard.
It's going to be hard, but it's going to be good.
Yeah. So those of you that are watching, again, the link to join the book club and stay in the loop is right there in the chat of whatever platform you're watching it on. You can also go to our YouTube page. Both of our YouTube page, it's the same tag that you see below. Mine is CJ Harris, ONE. Pastor John is John C. Richards Jr. And love for you all to connect with us there and be a part of our tribe there. Our goal, y'all, is just to help people get quality content, quality information, so that their lives can be better. And so we're basically going live to bring y'all in on the discussions that we've had privately. This is how we would get down if he and I were just on the phone talking about a book or something. And look up, man. And we talking. He was in the house when I called him, but he got in the car, went pick the kids up, dropped off lunch or something. I'm moving about in the airport. He's in the airport, something, whatever. But we making it happen. And so this is how we get down, y'all. This is how we get down.
Yeah, for sure. Man, appreciate you, brother, and looking forward to our conversation next month.
Y'all have an amazing day. Keep learning. Peace.